Choosing the parts you want to use to build your computer can be very difficult if you do not know what you are looking for. This video aims to help you in that and will focus on certain parts and certain aspects of the computer that you should look for when choosing what parts to build. The first part I want to go over is the case. The case is important as it's going to house all of the components inside of it, and so you'll want to make sure each and every single component will be compatible. The first component to go over is the motherboard. The motherboard is going to go inside the case on standoffs. You'll want to make sure it can fit on those standoffs based on the form factor. Make sure the case form factor and the motherboard form factor match, or that they have alternate standoff points that you can use to mount a motherboard. The next part to go over is the CPU cooler. The CPU cooler may be too tall for the case, and you'll want to make sure that it can fit inside of it. Check the width of the case and the height of the CPU cooler to make sure it can fit. If you're going to use a water cooler, you'll need to make sure that the case can support that water cooler either at the front of the case or the top of the case. The next component to go over is the power supply. Much like a motherboard, a power supply also has a form factor. This can be SFX or ATX. You'll want to make sure your case can support that form factor power supply. The next component to go over is hard drives, or storage drives. You'll need to make sure that your case can support the specific amount of storage drives that you have. It may only support 3.5-inch drives or 2.5-inch drives, so you'll have to check on that. The last component to go over is the video card. The video card needs a specific amount of room inside the case, that way it can fit. To check this, you're going to need to check the length of the video card and check the maximum supported video card length that your case can support. Other than the compatibility of the case, you may want to look on the features. The first is aesthetics. You want to make sure the case is aesthetically pleasing to you through its color scheme and whether it has side panels that are tempered glass so you can see the components inside. The next thing to go over is cable management. The first thing to talk about with cable management is cutouts. The case will have cutouts that will allow you to route cables from one component to the next. You want to make sure there are a good amount of cutouts that will allow you to easily route cables through the case. The next thing to go over is tie-down points on the right side panel. You want to make sure there are a good amount of tie-down points. That way you can tie cables down to them and keep them close to this panel. The last thing to go over is the basement or power supply shroud. The basement or power supply shroud can hide cables under it, which can keep slack from appearing in the computer. The next thing to go over is airflow. You want to make sure that your case has good airflow and that it can sufficiently cool your components. You can check this with benchmarks, or you can just try and see it for yourself by looking at the included amount of fan. The last thing to go over is the I/O of the case. You want to make sure your case has a good I/O and that one that will help you be more convenient. That way you do not have to use the motherboard I/O.